Hello. Today we'll be discussing Ireland's Magdalen Laundries and the experiences the women committed to these asylums had within their walls. Presenters today will be Megan Caulfield, Catherine Cormier, Jed Boyington, and myself, Colleen Alm. This is for Professor Wiggins' class, History 414, Politics and Culture of Modern Ireland. It's an important disclaimer to include that the women that will be focused on in this presentation do not represent all the women that pass through the laundries, but the few that were given a platform to speak from and share their vulnerability. There have been countless books, articles, journals, etc. that have discussed the issue from an analytical perspective, calculating how the system worked, how the Catholic Church and the Irish Free State worked in tandem to create and institute the laundries, and what reasoning they had for making such a system. But it's equally as important to discuss what the women committed to these laundries experienced. The few women who were able to come forward describe from their perspective the system from the inside, describing a day-to-day atmosphere that few people know about because of the fact it was kept so secret by the state and the church. These testimonials from the women that experienced it put a face to a name and a story to a life that was purposefully erased. By digging up such raw testimonials from the Maggies themselves, make sure that future generations, no matter the country or reasoning, do not repeat the mistakes of the past, as well as learning from it. Our methods for finding such testimonials include documentaries of both women in the laundry and the children that were born into the system, peer-reviewed journals from both the historical and psychological perspective, articles from newspapers and magazines, as well as the famous book by James Smith that breaks down the system that women in Ireland were subjected to. The asylums were created in the 18th century and lasted until 1996. It is believed that up to 30,000 women passed through the laundries during its operation. The laundries were named after Mary Magdalene, the prostitute who repented for her sins and was forgiven by Jesus in the Bible, later becoming one of his devout followers. Young Irish women were committed who had fallen in some way, from becoming an unwed mother to being too attractive for society and needing to repent for their sins. They dedicated almost 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, cleaning, washing, ironing, and folding cloth. The women would work for no pay, even though the church profited from the commercial service. Even though the laundries relied on voluntary commitments, the church would refuse to release women unless they had a place to live or someone respectable to take them in. If no one came to take them out of the laundries, they would often no longer be considered an Irish citizen and would have no rights as such while in the laundry. Not being an Irish citizen meant that these women did not have anything, not a wage, not an education, and not even the right to have a name on their gravestone. Christina Mulcahy was born in 1918 in Carrigan, County Galway, along the west coast of Ireland. When she was in her early 20s, she became pregnant after being coerced by her partner to have sex. She didn't have any knowledge of how sex worked because of the lack of sex education provided by the Irish Free State in schools across Ireland. In 1940, Mulcahy had a baby boy. According to Mulcahy, she said, quote, "The nuns didn't tell him I was writing him. They weren't sending the letters at all. He never got the letters I wrote out, and I never got any letters from him. So I lost out on him. I would have married him. I loved him." Mulcahy was made to give up her baby and was sent home to her family in Carrigan. When she approached her home, her father told her that she was not allowed back and that he was deeply ashamed of her. Without a place to live, Mulcahy was sent to a laundry in Galway and immediately went to confession in order to discuss her distress over giving up her son and being shunned by her family. She was heavily saddened and crying from her trauma to the priest. Mulcahy recounted that moment saying, quote, "The priest said, 'Well, come around this side and sit here and tell me about it,' and he was all exposed. I thought it would be my word against him. I was told to be quiet and keep my mouth shut, and I said to Sister Paul, 'Why are you saying these things to me? You think I'm crazy in my head, that I didn't see this thing?' The priest denied it straight away. I said I wouldn't go to confession in church anymore. The next thing I know, they cut off all my hair." Mulcahy resided in the laundry for years, with tensions escalating between her and the nuns when she demanded her baby or his whereabouts. One day she found an unlocked gate in the side entrance of the asylum's grounds, escaping and traveling Northern Ireland in order to avoid capture. The whereabouts of her baby boy is unknown. Martha Cooney was born in 1927 in Athlone, County Roscommon. In 1941, Cooney was sexually assaulted by her drunken cousin after attending a local carnival in the village when she was 14. She told her other cousin about the assault, and the cousin told her family members. Subsequently, she was sent to a laundry. This wasn't uncommon when Irish women and girls were assaulted or molested, as they are viewed by most of the community and the society as immoral and promiscuous. In order to avoid more grief and turmoil for the family name, the woman who was assaulted would be sent to a laundry and often not allowed back into the family. Because of this, many women knew that when they entered the laundry, they most likely would not come out, because no one would come to get them. Cooney recalled her assigned job, saying, quote, "I got varicose veins from the ironing at 15. I was told that it was a privileged job to do." For most of Cooney's days at the laundry, it was filled with prayer, silence, and atoning for sins through arduous ironing and manual labor. After 4 years, Cooney was rescued by one of her cousins in 1945. She recalled that it was very hard to acclimate to life outside of the asylum. Phyllis Valentine was born in 1940 in Seafield, County Clare. She grew up in an orphanage in County Clare and eventually attended an industrial school. She was 15 when she was sent to the Magdalen Laundry in Galway, where she would later be told by one of the nuns running the laundry that the reason she was committed was because she was too attractive and the nuns were afraid that Valentine would, quote, fall away. In Valentine's case, the church decided to act preemptively, where they thought she would be easily coerced into promiscuity and become pregnant. When Valentine arrived at the laundry, her long hair was cut and was given a canvas smock and corset. Both the corset and smock were uncomfortable when worn and were a uniform for the girls to wear at all times. Its purpose was both utility and to hide the figures of the young girls. Valentine recalled, quote, "You'd be told it's a sin to be vain. It was a sin to go around swinging your hair. It was a sin to be looking at your body. You were told that by the nuns." In her first week of work, Valentine asked the nuns why the girls weren't paid for their work, and she remembered, quote, "The nuns laughed at me. I felt degraded." In times when women would be punished, Valentine recalled, quote, "The nuns had this black leather belt that was tied around their waist and hung quite low to the ground, and they used to wrap it up around their hand and really hit you hard with it. They were vicious, some of the nuns very vicious." In 1964, Valentine was released. Later in life, she married a man and would eventually have issues with him regarding sex because of the shame instilled around it from the nuns at the asylum. The couple would later divorce.
The Magdalen Laundries were pitched to women and families as a place for work and to receive an education. What many of the women and families did not know or realize too late was that this was all under a false pretense. In reality, the women and young girls would in fact not receive an education and would have to work grueling hours without pay instead. The definition of slavery, according to dictionary.com, states that a practice or institution that treats or recognizes some human beings as the legal property of others. For the young women and girls at the Magdalen Laundries, this was what their lives entailed and how they were viewed. Mary King's story with the Magdalen Laundries entails her being sent there as a child because of her status as an orphan, and that's how she was subjugated to the abuse. What Mary states with her experience in these laundries is, and I quote, "I was put into that convent and I was a slave. I was never educated in there." With this testimony, Mary illuminates the fact that the church could claim that working every day in those grueling conditions was their form of education, but Mary asserts that, and I quote, "We must tell the truth here. We were child slaves. I never got an education from there at all. I was never educated." Mary's viewpoint on the Magdalen Laundries and their claim of educating women and young girls as, and I quote, "That's not education, that's slavery." Additionally, on how the laundries stole these young women and girls' education through false pretense is seen through Kathleen Legg's story. Kathleen discusses that she spent 2 years in the laundry under a false pretense. She states that she and her family believed that she was going to a type of training center for young girls, but in reality it was not. Kathleen now states that looking back, and I quote, "This leads you to believe that it was a proper training college, and it was real work." Similar to Mary previously, Kathleen also viewed her time in the laundries as a form of slavery because of the lack of education and respect promised, and instead, no education and abuse. She stated that, and I quote, "Yes, it was slavery, because you worked all those years and all those hours and never had a penny in my pocket." Furthermore, Kathleen talks about how her experience with the laundry was traumatizing and terrible due to the physical conditions that were put on her and countless women, but also including that on top of the physical labor, Kathleen states that she had been perpetually abused by unnamed nuns. Kathleen states that the emotional damage she faced from the laundries include, and I quote, "Every night I can still see the convent. My life changed." And that for her, the relationship with the laundry sadly still, and I quote, "Till the day I die, it will be with me." Kathleen lived afterwards in England and was married for 30 years and never told her husband what she had encountered. With Mary Smith's story with the laundries, it illustrates another side to them. Mary was put into a laundry in Cork solely because her mother was unwed when she had Mary, and then the church believed and viewed Mary could end up like her mother and get pregnant. Similar to Mary King's story, Mary Smith was put into the laundry with absolutely no consent, and did not have a voice to object against this cruelty. In her case, also, when she was there, they changed her name and removed in many ways her identity in their abuse of power. What is so harrowing and upsetting is that Mary discussed how she would often look around at the older women and wonder if one of them could be her mother, since she had never known or met her mother but knew she was in a laundry. Mary also discussed that she did not receive an education and that she said, "I did not know how to read or write." With Mary's story, it illuminates how the laundries, because of their constant abuse of power being done by those who ran them, could reach and spread across generations. Mary words this idea as, and I quote, "They took my mother's life, they took my family away from me, they took my home away from me." Mary never ended up having children because of the fear and daily reminders that she was there because her mother had a child, and the overall constant mental abuse being put on her daily at the Magdalen Laundries, and it influenced the rest of her life. Here is a clip of Mary Smith discussing her thoughts on the Magdalen Laundries.
And I will blame the church and state for doing this, incarcerating me into the Magdalen Laundries in case I had a child, in case I got pregnant. What is wrong with getting pregnant? What is wrong with having a child? Nothing. That is not a crime.
Margaret Bowen is yet another victim of the laundries. Her daughter tells her story because she was unable to. Margaret's tragic story starts at the very beginning when her mother gave birth to her while she was a patient in a mental hospital in Dublin in the mid-1950s. Along with her 6 siblings, Margaret went home to fall victim to a negligent father, and at the age of 3, she was taken away to the High Park Industrial School and Laundry. Her daughter Samantha said that, quote, "that was the end of her and the outside world." Then, in Margaret's early teenage years, she was moved to a school named St. Teresa's in Black Rock. There she was, quote, "certified mentally unfit for education but fit for work." They determined this by her IQ score. At the age of 16, Margaret was then moved to the Magdalen Laundry at Gloucester Street. There she became pregnant with her 2 daughters, Samantha and Etta. How she became pregnant is still a mystery, but Samantha says that when she met her mother for the first time, it was evident that she had been sexually assaulted by multiple predators. Samantha says that Margaret, quote, "knew that somebody hurt her once, and then she had babies, but because of the lack of education, she never actually made that connection." At the ages of 23, Samantha and Etta met their mother. Margaret was 42 years old, but appeared to be much older, masked by decades of hard labor. Samantha said that her mother had asked them, quote, "extremely innocent questions because she just has not been educated and out into the real world." Not long after they met, Margaret died from Goodpasture syndrome, which is caused from chemicals found in the laundries. Samantha still talks about her mother to this day and is fighting for justice. The story of Susan is one that was all too common during the laundries. While we may not know this woman's real name, she was brave enough to recount her experiences in the laundry while in a counseling session for the effects of long-term sexual abuse. At the time of the interview, she was about 60 years old, and this was her first time opening up about her experiences in the laundry. At a very young age, Susan was sexually assaulted, and when she told her school teacher, who was also a nun, Susan began her trip to hell that would be her life in the laundries. After Susan told the nun then told the head priest that Susan had been assaulted. Susan was then transferred to an industrial school, and then at the age of 14, she was transferred into one of the laundries. Susan was never even given closure about what happened to the man that assaulted her. She just remembers being forced to leave her family, and instead of bringing the man that assaulted her to justice, it was easier for the church to brush her aside and put her into the laundries, where they thought nobody would ever listen to her story. In 2018, the President of Ireland, Michael Higgins, hosted a gala in the Mansion House in Dublin. This gala and the state meeting was organized to, again, address the mistreatment of Irish women in the laundries. 220 survivors from Ireland, the UK, and Australia attended. All the attendees stayed at the same hotel, but since their names had been changed in the laundries, many did not know each other. According to Maeve O'Rourke, a legal advisor for the Justice for Magdalen's research project, quote, "they put up a notice board in the hotel for people to put messages on and try to trace people that they knew in the laundries. One of the attendees, Elizabeth Coppins, had been abused by her father and then experienced abuse as well in the laundries. She had tried to commit suicide, but failed in her attempt. She decided to come to the gala to find old connections. All of the survivors took a bus from the hotel to the mansion house. When they arrived, they were greeted with crowds of people holding signs and showing their support. Quote, "We couldn't believe it," Coppins says. "Not just women, but men and children too. It was wonderful and very emotional." Ongoing support from people all over the world gives hope that the laundries will never be forgotten.
The stories of the atrocities committed in these laundries seem like something that would be unavoidable and all-encompassing, something that people would be talking about on a daily basis. But that's not what happens. The stories of the laundries have been submerged and stifled, much like the women who were held in them. The laundries have been ignored and suppressed in the Irish culture, to a point that they have been nearly forgotten. When unclaimed women who were unfortunate enough to die while still in the laundry, they couldn't expect to be buried along with their name. There have been several discoveries of several mass graves filled with unnamed and unknown women of the laundries, and the Catholic Church refuses to release the documents that may well be the last chance to identify the forgotten women. This is due to the fact that these women of the laundries were not even granted human rights in the eyes of the law at the time. Only a select few of women have been successfully identified. The rest continue to be anonymous in the eyes of history.